Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our apparel sourcing trends session. My name is Milton Hernandez, Director of Industry Insights and Community at Informa Markets Fashion. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Informa Markets Fashion is a producer of leading fashion trade events that include Sourcing at Magic, which is our domestic and international gathering of manufacturers, suppliers, service providers from apparel, footwear, manufacturing, textiles, materials, and technology solutions. So if you're a designer joining us for the first time today, we encourage you to check out our website, sourcingatmagic.com. And we also invite you to register and shop Sourcing at Magic in person in Las Vegas this August 8th through 11th, as well as online starting August 2nd. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Helen Palmer, Head of Materials, Knits, and Textiles at WGSN, who will discuss the key apparel sourcing trends for Spring-Summer 2022 and Autumn-Winter 2022 and 2023. At the end of the session, we will be hosting a live Q&A with Helen, so please be sure to stick around and jot down any questions you may have on any of the trends being discussed today. We'll get started very shortly, but first, I'll review a few housekeeping items. So number one, please note that you will be placed on mute for the duration of the call. All questions will be answered via the Q&A log or at the end of the presentation. Please be sure to close all other browsers while viewing the webinar to help with the quality of your connection. Number three, if you experience any system issues at all, please click on the Q&A widget down below and we'll be sure to help you. And most importantly, a recording of the presentation will be emailed to you in the next few days, along with the full trend toolkit that is being presented. And without further ado, I'll hand it off to Helen Palmer. Helen, please take it away.
Hi, so thank you very much for the introduction and thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm really thrilled to be part of this session. My name is Helen Palmer and I am responsible for the materials, textiles and knits at WGSN, and I work with a team of editors and designers who are bringing the latest information around what's happening in the fashion and textiles industry, from trend forecasting to trade show analysis. And I'm very delighted to bring you a little bit of a recap on our Spring 22 and Autumn-Winter 22-23 main sourcing directions for the season. So we wanted to just start off with our sort of bullet point of the sort of key things for the season, really. And what's really interesting and probably even more important as we go through the season is that these colors, fibers, patterns, textiles and materials are real building blocks for the season. And I think more than ever, what we're finding is that brands and designers and manufacturers and makers are really considering the raw material when it comes to the final design of their products. So I think sustainability, innovation, and just really the way that the world is changing is starting to really make designers and the whole textile pipeline really sort of drill down on, you know, the colors they're choosing and sourcing, the fibers they're selecting. You know, a lot of things are playing into this around responsible materials, traceability, sustainability, and that's really, really key. The other thing we're finding is that as fabrics are maybe getting a little bit more simple, you know, patterns and textures are becoming quite important. And we are seeing quite a drive on patterns and sort of dye effects and colors coming through on fabric. So this is quite an interesting way of updating quite simple products. And then the textiles and the materials themselves, although we are seeing quite a lot of novelty, I would say that we're still in a sort of a quieter moment when it comes to innovation for textiles and materials design. So there's a lot going on in science-based innovation and sustainability. But in terms of the look and feel of textiles and materials, there's a little bit more reassurance. We're seeing a lot of textures and materials that are quite reassuring and cozy and familiar. And I think that these fabrics can sort of transition from one season to another and become a little bit more fabrics that you want to invest in and keep for longer. So within our trends, you'll see fabrics that can be quite classic, but actually behind that, we're very much focused on the fiber, the technology, special finish or color updates. So it's really about how to optimize fabrics to make them fresh and exciting, but still maintain a kind of a reassuring quality to them. So before we actually get into the trends, we just wanted to focus on a few consumer drivers that we're really interested in and things that are just sort of sparking conversations in the office, just sort of information that we're gleaning about how consumers are thinking and how that will really sort of help to shape the products of the future. And really one of the sort of things that we're thinking about is that consumers are starting to come out of a period of introspection. I think with the whole COVID pandemic, it's really affected everybody globally. And during that time, we definitely saw spending was going on to more sort of introverted products. So people were very much focused on their home and also on sort of small luxuries. So we saw a lot of underwear and sleepwear and loungewear coming through. And I think that this idea of products having an emotional resonance with consumers is something that will continue. We definitely think that tactility and comfort is something that will definitely continue. At the same time, I think that there's also been an interest in technology. And I think that what we did find is that consumers were buying a lot of interesting sort of outerwear because the outdoors was very important to go out and get fresh air. And we're spending money on sneakers and on jackets with multifunctional benefits or products that are quite adaptable. So there are two sort of different areas coming on, one which is about multifunctional products and the other which is about this more emotional kind of connection with products, things that will last longer, better quality, softness, all of those things that kind of resonate on a very sort of human level. The other thing is that a sort of a recessionary mindset has been sort of quite present for us. And one of the sort of exciting and innovative things around that is we saw this real resurgence with craft. Linking to tactility as well in a way, and fun, because people were spending more time at home, spending time with their family, and we saw a lot of crafting and making and a lot of fun in creativity. And I think this is starting to really sort of influence textiles going forward. And I think on top of that, we also have more of a thoughtful approach to craft. So I think companies, brands, designers are looking at more fair and equitable partnerships with artisan regions and craftspeople. So I think we want to see craft having a very authentic feel. So it's about partnering with companies and with individuals and communities to kind of really champion craft at a really authentic level. I guess the other thing that we're finding around the DIY side is that it's also about frugality. So people making their own things, crafting, and that sort of enjoyment of saving money, which is quite interesting. I guess the other thing that we have seen is that with the pandemic, some companies have kind of faltered a little bit on their sustainable strategies, but others are really pushing forward. And I think that consumers have had time to reflect and really think about the world. They've reconnected with nature. And I think that awareness of nature is actually making the consumer a little bit more curious about the products, where they're made, how they're made, where things come from. So I think that idea of traceability and having more of an ethical standpoint on what you're making and sourcing and producing is really, really key. So I think that's incredibly important. So some of the sort of consumer statistics around here were quite interesting. So what we saw is that in the US, personal savings skyrocketed. And I think what's really interesting about that is that it's just, people just thinking about how much they're spending, what they're spending their money on. So I think that's an interesting statistic to consider about how consumers are purchasing. And I think it is a little bit more cautious. A really interesting statistic is around the global technical textiles market. And that's rocketed. And I think that what we're starting to see in fabric here is that probably around 80% of all fabrics now produced have at least one technical function. So fabric is no longer just about design and aesthetic and structure and color mixing, and it could be all those things, but behind that is functionality, and that can be comfort, it could be softness, it could be washability. But I think the consumers want a bit more from their fabric, so it's really important to consider the sort of technical aspects of fabrics. And I think sustainability plays into that as well. So obviously, you have to consider function, but also consider sustainability. And where those two don't work together, you have to kind of consider the compromises there. Leading on to that, just the idea of natural fibers, natural colours. We've seen quite an increase in plant-based materials and plant-based colour. So there's been a growth from 2020, which is projected to move into 2026. We have seen a lot of companies sort of foraying into a lower impact kind of way of looking at colour. So that can be colour that comes from waste food industries, plant-based botanical dyes, or even just lower impact dyes that use less water, less chemicals. So this is definitely a shift, and we're seeing all sectors of the fabric industry, leather industry, print, all those areas are really looking at inks, dyes, and colour in general, how to really mitigate some of the impact of that. And then the last statistic is around comfort, 23% increase on knitted shirts. And I think this is a good indicator of where things are moving. We're seeing more fabrics that look knitted. We're seeing more knitted fabrics that appear to be woven. We're seeing a lot more drawstrings, a lot of softer kind of ties and shaping. And I just think that with people spending more time at home, even if they want a smarter look, we're definitely seeing comfort built into the style of garments. And we're also seeing fabrics that are breathable, they're softer, they have natural stretch, they have, they're more thermoregulating. So I think all of those, again, comfort benefits are really coming through. So that is very much a key driver. So this is a quote actually that I gave for a piece of work that we were writing at WGSN as one of our white papers. But I think it kind of summarizes, we were asked to sort of summarize what consumers are thinking about right now with regards to sustainability. So we wanted to sort of flag that and share it with you. And the quote is, we're starting to see consumers really expecting brands to tackle their environmental and social impacts from the fibre up. So this is really about following a product right from the fibre all the way through the supply chain. They want companies to make better informed fibre-led decisions. And I think this will be a real product differentiator for brands and enable them to offer more responsible product choices to an increasingly knowledgeable consumer. And certainly from the conversations I've had with brands around sustainability, I think it's not just enough to be on a program and really look at your strategy. You have to be able to sort of show what you're doing and how well you're doing and be really honest about that. And that will really take the customer with you to sort of set milestones and be really clear on how you're going to achieve those. And little by little, just be honest and authentic about it. So in terms of the seasonal trend narrative, we've called this fragile innovation. And this is really about what the consumer is feeling. The consumers are starting to really reassess their place in the world. It's been a really difficult and challenging time for everybody in the last 18 months. I think well-being is going to be really important. So we're definitely seeing this prioritization of well-being that kind of transcends the sort of normal practices. So I think it's about people being more authentic, more attuned to the world around them, to the environment, to their family and friends, and just really taking notice of things that they really care about. And I think that for products to do well in this space, they need to sort of attach to a consumer on an emotional level. They've got to have a purpose, they've got to have a function, they've got to fulfill a need. Or maybe it's about them being really beautiful and covetable and things that are well made and last a long time. Or it could just be something that's fun and engaging and makes someone feel good. So I think that clothes are more than just that. They really need to tap into consumer psyche. What we're finding is emotionally uncertain times are calling the consumer back to simple pleasures. So again, staying indoors, but also being outdoors. So one of the things that we found at WGSN is we're looking at garments and products that do indoor and outdoor really well. So they can transition from something that you can lounge in and be cozy, but they also have some performance technology or insulating benefits or climate protection that will be useful when you go outside. We're also seeing a lot of layering up. So I think pieces that will work in a wardrobe with other products is really important here. The other thing that we're really seeing is this idea of escapism and nostalgia. So I think we are seeing, you know, a little bit more of a vintage feel. We're harking back to slightly more traditional fabrics. I think within that, there's room to be clever, to put in technology, to put in performance, to kind of play and tweak with structures and colors. But I think that sort of nostalgia for sort of simple checks and stripes and sort of well-known fabrics and patterns and motifs, it's something that can be played with. It can be quite fun and lively, but it still has a bit of a traditional core. The other thing that we're definitely seeing is this idea of less is more. This is a very difficult conversation to have with brands, I think, around making less or showing less. But I think it's about selective. It's about perhaps the consumers selecting to have less products, but having them work harder. They're able to function for different sort of occasions or different times of the day or different activities. And then, as I said before, this idea of adaptability and trans-seasonality is really, really important. So here we've got keywords such as classic, layerable, adaptable, and this idea that sort of fabrics and materials and products are easy. They're easy to layer, easy to mix. They can sort of go with other things in your wardrobe, and they create these really sort of reliable, dependable wardrobe staples. So another key message around the season is about colour. And at WGSN, sustainability is such a vital foundation to the work that we're doing, the research we're doing with customers. And we've actually changed quite significantly the way we work with colour, because what we're doing now is we're splitting our colours into some different sort of categories. So we've got core colours, which we have had for a few seasons. But what we have started doing actually is pinpointing annual colour as well as seasonal colour. And I think this is a really interesting sort of way of working, because we're realising that colour that's really good foundational colour is staying for longer. And colour is such an investment for companies. So what we're doing is to try and be more helpful is we're looking at the evolution of colour. So we are carrying colours over from one season to another and making them annual. And then if they've been around for a while, then we look at them in terms of, are they a core colour, a base colour? And then that gives us a bit of room to be quite free and be quite spontaneous with our fashion colours. We're actually, I would say, recycling around maybe even 30% of our colours, because we think they're such good colours and we don't want things to just be a flash in the pan. And not all colours are made equal. So I think that we're definitely really working hard with our core colours, making sure they're really spot on and tweaking them season on season if they need it over time. You know, things like the navies or the olives, you know, how are they working? How are they nuancing? What is their sort of nuance for different markets? We're pinpointing which colours are more of a seasonal or a seasonal hit. And I think we're just really analysing a lot how the colours are working. So just to sort of give you a bit of a breakdown on the colours on the screen, this is a snapshot of some of our colours. As you can see, the core colours, we've got very, very classic, the French navies, the blacks, the silver grey, the olive oil, which is, we think, has turned into a classic. So that, you know, the importance of green is you know, very, very strong. And then we have a colour called unbleached cotton. And again, we're kind of bearing in mind a kind of more sustainable feel. So we haven't got a bleached white in there. Then in terms of some of our striking colours on the left, the size of these colours are to do with their interest on social media, how they're being used by our teams. You can see there's quite a lot of excitement around some of our core colours. So orchid flower, this has been a really good pink for us. And this is a colour that we think is very important. The mango sorbet has been a real surprise, and it's a lovely jolt of colour. The honeycomb for us and the butter tones, they are really nice, warm sort of colours that are sort of coming out of neutral, but they have this warmth and softness to them, and they're great for sort of knitwear or leather. They're quite sort of tactile colours. We have sweet coral, which is a much sweeter, softer pink to the orchid, and that has a bit more of a romantic feel. Our blues, we've got a very core, like the Atlantic, which is a really, really nice colour. It's very commercial. It works across lots of different categories and markets. But the digital violet is a really fresh tone. So again, it has a cleaner intensity. It can work really, really well for spring, summer. And then, of course, the greens. We've got the jade, the aloe, and the celery juice. And I think even the names sort of really refer to the fact that they're cleansing, they're refreshing, they're mineral, they're green. You know, I think we're certainly feeling that greens are really important with this sort of healing quality. So in terms of the sort of cluster of really important colours that we're finding, it's quite interesting. We've got those kind of really lovely, edible, natural greens that have a real feeling of sort of health about them. We've got these warm sort of orangey tones like the mango and the honeycomb and the butter. They're very sort of enticing. They're quite sort of, they're quite uplifting and energizing. We have the artisanal red, which is a slightly sort of pigmented red, which is not that bright, but it's very sort of warm and spicy, which is lovely. And then we've got a few versions of the pinks. Then for blue, it's quite cool. So the Atlantic, which is very watery and cleansing, and then the digital violet, which is a bit more of our sort of fashion tone. So that's a kind of a bit of insight into some of our key colour areas. So next, we're going to move into big ideas for textiles for the season. So first up, our big idea is hashtag. It's one of our sort of hashtag terms at WSN, tech-elegant function. So a bit of a play on tech elegance, really. I think so. This is where we see this real hybrid between fashion and sportswear still very much continuing. And I think it also continues what we're seeing in fabrics is that functionality is becoming as important as design and is becoming part of design within fabric. We're definitely seeing that, you know, the movement of fabric that is fashion and active coming together. This is something that's been going on for a long time, but it's still there and it's still really important. I think what we are seeing here is that a bit more of an elegant, smarter look is coming through. And I think that's the kind of the tweak or the seasonal update here. So some of the sort of call outs around this is about injecting technical fabrics with everyday luxury. It's about giving a sort of silkier, softer, slightly more evening wear focus, perhaps, in this sort of area. So it's kind of making it a little bit more elevated, a bit more luxurious. Customers are now expecting a high level of adaptability and multifunction, but it also means that the fabric can still look good as well. So it's not sort of compromising the look and feel for the technology. It's kind of marrying those together really beautifully. So it's very much about light and layerable trans-seasonal fabrics here. So again, this is great for sort of proofs that could be worn in the winter over sort of heavier items. But it's also great for light cover-ups in the spring, summer seasons as well for showers and sort of weatherproofing or anti-UV. So it's definitely much about a layering story. The other thing is that what's really key here in terms of innovation is looking at sustainable fibers. So here we're looking at things like ocean-bound plastic, recycled fibers, such as the nylons like Econil and Reprieve. And then I think for maybe a silkier drapier look, you could look at the cellulosic fibers like lyocells and maybe even things like coated cottons. But the sort of key material characteristics, they need to be light and very, very breathable, possibly packable, so they can just be packed away and used when needed. The different sort of characteristics of the fabrics can be embossed or papery touch, which we're seeing quite a lot of, this sort of crumpled look. Lightweight quilting for more wintry sort of layers or add-ons. And then a kind of a more sartorial or smart look coming through. So this can be through fine patterns like pinstripes or checks. We also like this moire or taffeta look that's coming through, or this yarn dye effect that has a little bit of a sort of shot or a tonic look. And then, of course, climate protection and functionality is really important. So wind, showerproof, downproof qualities. And then really think about finishes. So we're looking at sort of seeing where we can take out the kind of elastanes that are sort of hampering onward recyclability, looking at maybe bio-based or recycled content for stretch, also bio-based synthetics, and also natural finishes. So I think what we're seeing in the activewear innovation space is that Oil-based fabrics are being looked at quite seriously, and we are seeing some bio-based alternatives starting to really come to attention. So I think there's a lot of innovation on the fiber side coming through in performance materials. So in terms of patterns, we're looking at simple stripes and checks and color blocking. And then we've just pulled out some of our key sort of colors as foundational colors here, but these are 3 colors that you can build on. So we've got the grey with the red. It's really quite universal.
Hi, everyone. This is Milton. It seems that we have a bit of a technical difficulty, so we will be back. And please, thank you for your patience.
So I'm going to talk about trend number 2, which is the outdoor boom. In uncertain times, we are looking to nature to be a real unifier and healer. Reconnecting to the outdoors means really investing in sustainable, restorative textiles. And I think this is a really, really important area across all the different categories. And what we're finding is that fabrics are quite classical and are seen through a softer and more nostalgic lens. However, technology is still quite important here to underpin this trend. So we're looking at certified traceable natural fibers. So looking at cashmere, merino wool, alpaca. Again, really think about sustainable sourcing here and making sure that fibers are ethically sourced and are fully traceable. We're also seeing an uptick in linen and hemp as well coming through, both for winter blends and for spring-summer blends, as well, of course, with certified cottons and some lyocell for softness and drape for sort of lighter weights. In terms of key materials, we've got durable twills and drills, fine needle cords, moleskins, proofed Macintosh cottons. It's all about that sort of traditional outdoor wear with natural water repellency and this idea of lined and reversible qualities being really important. In terms of patterns and structures, again, it's really quite classic. So we're looking at heritage-driven tartans and checks, really classical, simple sartorial stripes. And then in the more casual area, we're looking at really soft cotton casual, so a softer hand feel coming through to update those chino fabrics, drills and twills. And then things like coated cottons for Macintoshes and sort of proofed outdoor wear that's more natural. In terms of fabrics, I think having a slightly more vintage feel is quite nice here. So the idea of softly brushed, peach, slightly worn in textures is really nice, giving a bit of a vintage feel. And these sort of slightly irregular colors as well. So I think that this is about things that look like they're cherished and they are sort of your wardrobe favorites. They have a slightly disheveled or creased feel to them for the casual wear area. Or they are also this idea of fabrics that have been passed down over time in a more like heirloom. So very traditional checks and patterns and designs. So some key colors here, we've got the soft green, the sort of really classic blue, and this really lovely warm brown tone. So our third big idea is work-leisure hybrids. And again, I think this really resonates with everybody. This idea of leisure, you know, business leisure or work leisure. And what we're seeing, obviously, is that a lot of people, not everyone, but quite a lot of people are working from home or are having a slightly different approach to their work life and home life. So what we're finding is that the smarter categories have been quite affected by the pandemic. But I think that new sort of suiting blends and smarter fabrics are doing well where they're becoming a bit more adaptable. They're becoming a bit more casualized, a bit more adaptable to working from home. And also, we're definitely looking at fabrics that will take you from daytime working to the evening or going outdoors as well. So I think it's about these a smarter fabric look being a lot softer, easier to wear, softer on the skin, but then also looking at things like less crease, things that don't bag, so things that kind of keep their shape when you're sitting around quite a lot. So I think that built-in comfort performance is actually going to be really important. So it's kind of fabrics that are relaxed enough to make you feel quite calm, but maybe smart enough to be having a Zoom call or a business meeting. So here we're seeing more semi-tailored looks coming through, and then multi-purpose qualities that are kind of smart enough, but also have some drape and softness as well. And for women's wear, we're definitely seeing quite a lot of silkier qualities coming through in this area, whether it's silky shirts and blouse weights, but also maybe having more of a sheen on the soft jackets or dress. So a little bit more feminine look coming through. So in terms of fibers, we're looking at very smooth but hard wearing blends. So things like cottons are still really important, but quite smooth and mercerized. We're looking at linen and hemp coming through in very fine qualities, as well as silk. And then very, very lightweight merino wool for jackets and separates. Definitely silky looks are coming through. So there's an importance of the sort of lyocell families like tencel and all the different modal qualities. And then, also looking at piece silk and sort of more cruelty-free silks coming through as well. So in terms of key materials, we're looking at peach and brush plains, twills, satin stripes. I think stripes are really important here, formal shirting stripes, and then little micro dobbies and jacquards. So again, quite discreet. I think definitely stripes are quite a big category here, especially for blouses and tops. In terms of colours, we've got this soft sage green. We've got this really lovely trans-seasonal sort of pink tone, and then a sort of a very soft neutral sort of oyster colour. So tactility is something we've been touching on for a long time, and I think that it's definitely a really big driver across all the fabric categories. I think as people are spending more time on their screens and everything's becoming very flattened, we're definitely seeing tactility being extremely important. And this can be from summer weights that are dry and crispy and fresh and lightweight, all the way through to much softer, more indulgent, sort of silky qualities. And I think, again, it's about reconnecting with touch. So here we have hyper-textured materials that can evolve to really soften smarter looks and add a bit less of a formal look. Also adding discrete texture to plains. So this idea of maybe little waffles or embossing or seersuckers, just to really update something classic like shirting stripes or suiting qualities. And also I think having these sort of micro textures that can be quite breathable, especially for the summer season. So I think we're looking at also, there's a little bit of a merging between winter and summer. So we are seeing drier touches in the winter and warmer touches in spring, summer. I think as we start to really blur the seasons, blur the kind of climates, we'll start to see that fabrics and products will want to be able to be worn season in and season out and just layered up. Necessarily seeing, fabrics for spring, summer, fabrics for autumn, winter anymore. It's all about how things are layered and built on in the wardrobe. In terms of key fibers, we're looking at very breathable cottons and linens. Superfine crepes are really important here to give a springy handle. Very superfine sort of tropical wools, and then recycled synthetics like polyester and nylon, and some of the new generation sustainable qualities there too. In terms of key materials, we're looking at retraction, seersuckers working really well, and updating microchecks and stripes. And then this idea of applications or finishes that will give texture. So looking at hammered or crushed textures, micro pleats, retraction. So just kind of giving much more movement to fabric, whether it's shivery and sort of crepey, or if it's sort of soft and lofty. It's really about texture. In terms of colours, we've got some key fashion colours here for updates. And we've got this soft orange, the green, and this lovely lilac as a sort of quite fashion-forward way of updating planes. So our fifth big idea we have is craftisan. And really this is coming from this real sort of focus that we've all had on the importance of communities, culture, home, family, making. And it's a really sort of joyful expression. And I think it's something that is a shift. It's not really a trend. It's kind of like, I feel it's kind of how the consumer's sort of embracing their pastimes, creativity. And I think it's spawning a real appreciation of craftsmanship as well. So this is something that we feel should be permeating across seasons, across the different markets. And I think it's really interesting for companies to really look at the crafts that are happening in their region and to really work out how you can support those communities and really bring forward what's happening in and celebrate local crafts. We're very much focused on this idea of localized design and meaningful artisan partnerships, really putting them in the spotlight for collaborations. And we are seeing a lot of brands working with makers, with artisans, with communities, and designers and artists as well. So I think this idea of working out how you can create something new and fresh with different people, but making sure that you honor them and it's a shared work. It's not taking something and making it yours. It's actually celebrating the people who have originated those ideas. I think that this idea of regional craft also taps into sustainability and making things closer to home and also sort of shoring up the community and spending money locally and things like that. So there's a really, really nice story around this, which we think is something we want to really embed in design thinking. We think it's really important. So from an aesthetic point of view, it's very much about more crafted materials and things that are like, for example, hand wovens or hand dyeing or embroideries. Again, I think if you're going to scale that up for big volumes, you've really got to think about how to make that equitable and fair and make it scalable and work for the people you work with. In terms of key fibers, this is quite a nice one for really mixing fibers. It's all about locally sourced, so very strong on cotton, hemp, linen, all the bast fibers here. Also for casual to occasion wear pieces, you can also look at the sort of silkier looks, so looking at cellulosics and pea silks. And I think what's really nice is you can mix fibers up in a lot of the colour wovens. You can use odds and ends and dead stock fibers and really think about how to use what you have that's local or that you've got to hand. So looking at creativity based on what you have and what stock you have, which I think is really interesting, and finding creative ways to design around that. In terms of the materials, we're looking at slubbed, boucle and clipped yarns, creating more texture within weaves. We're looking at pin tucks and smock textures. Also, this is a great one for open work, so eyelets, shirtings, broderies, embroidered laces and cutworks and dobbies, stripes and checks. So you could have a little bit more of an artisan casual feel as well as a bit more of a fancy feel. Here we have dobby stripes, embroideries, jacquards. Again, look at region-specific patterns. So it's a bit less about cultural appropriation. It's about looking at what's local to you and what your brand is and how you want to sort of show your culture and celebrate craft in that way. Also, there's an element of make, do and mend, and this idea of hand-loom tweeds and handmade and artisan weaves using recycled yarns or ad hoc artistic construction. So this could be a really nice creative story here. And then our sixth big idea is embracing softness. And again, this looks like a wintry story, but I think really, again, we see this as a universal trend, and it's creeping into spring, summer as well in the kind of micro terries and plush fabrics. We're seeing a lot of terry toweling and sort of really soft, very, very lightweight sort of boucles for spring, summer that's fresh in cottons. But it can also be those lovely soft sort of felted, brushed and sueded warm handle materials as well. So the concept really around this is about building softness through pre-loved materials, tactile design and soft or plush textiles to build physical and emotional comfort, soothing anxious consumers. And I think also there is a focus on self-care and looking at at skin as well. We're seeing a lot of people really investing in skin products. And also we're seeing this trickling into fabrics. So looking at fabrics that are moisturizing, or they're anti-allergic, or they have some boosting minerals in them. So I think it's all about softness, comfort, wellness, and well-being sort of packaged up in fabrics. So all of those things are really important. We're seeing that plush continuing from last spring, summer. And I think this sort of softly textured feel can work across different weights, from, you know, outdoor coats and jackets all the way through to the sort of lightest, softest layers. In terms of blends, we're looking at soft cottons and linens even that are soft, with cashmere and merinos. And it's about really mixing those sort of summer and winter fabrics together to create slightly more seasonal weights. So this is great for things like cashmere and cotton and things like that. So really looking at how different fibers can create a really nice, attractive hand feel and characteristic. So we're also looking at low impact, really soft leather and suede. So look at sort of traceable and certified qualities there. Also vegan equivalent. So think about what are the other options around leathers and skins. Also looking at super tactile bouclettes and plush, and then this idea of brushed up, napped, raised and sueded textures. And then this is not so much of a pattern story, but you could think about sort of classic patterns like checks and stripes, simple designs, maybe more raised textures or tonal designs, and keeping the softness quite key, especially things like reversible qualities or double-faced as well. So you get contrast or interesting construction in the garment itself. So how these big ideas sit on the spectrum, ranging from commercial to conceptual. So again, I think the outdoor boom, it's such a universal trend. And I think this is something, this kind of appreciation of nature is something that we think will continue to be such a big driver for the consumer for the very foreseeable future. So I think that fabrics that play to that outdoor feel is really important. And that can be about talking about nature and celebrating nature, but it can also be about enjoyment, about being outdoors as well. So it can be about sport, it can be about leisure, and all the things that go around pursuits and activities around the outdoors area. So that's something definitely to kind of think about. It's a very commercial way to talk about fabrics and products. And then, of course, the embracing softness, which speaks to wellness. It speaks to the kind of more anxious consumer that's a bit more less inclined to be spending on novelty. So really playing into tactility and softness and well-being. Then as we move to the spectrum, we've got the craft design trend and work leisure trend. I think that these are, again, quite interesting ideas because they're about hybrids in a way. So the work leisure is looking at more adaptable fabrics that kind of are quite lifestyle driven, things that go from smart to casual, and that work really hard for multiple pursuits or multiple activities. And then I think the craft design trend is a really great one to partner up. So it's looking at craft, how you can integrate that into your product range, you know, in capsules, you know, working with fabric makers or artisans to sort of think about how you can add differentiation to your range. And also, I think it taps into the consumer sentiment around do it yourself and home crafting as well. I think there's become much more of an appreciation of craft. And then also, as people are making more things themselves, they're kind of realizing that these fabrics take time and they're made by people and they need to pay attention to, you know, how things are made. So I think that's a really, really positive step. Then as we move more to the conceptual, we've got tactile texturing. So this is quite a nice way of being a bit more experimental with fabrics. So you could take quite classic fabrics and think about how to apply texture through the construction or through the finish, and think about even more sculptural or three-dimensional effects. And then obviously the technique and function trend, which is about that hybrid between sports and fashion. So this is one to have fun with, really think about color, finish, and then obviously all the sort of multifunctional qualities that can really boost the fabric's performance as well as its look and feel. So in terms of our trend checklist, we've just got 4 kind of takeaways for you. So the first one is extend comfort into enhanced well-being. So I think well-being is a really big driver for us, and we're seeing this across fashion, across beauty, food, the home. It's something that's a really big macro trend. So to meet the challenge of an increasingly unpredictable times for consumers, I think the shift towards products and textiles that support emotional resilience will continue. It's about fabrics that can regulate the mood and boost energy and also boost wellness properties. And that can be through its actual physical performance, but it can also be through color that's sort of life-affirming and mood-enhancing, and touch and tactility and softness as well. The second thing is push for progress on sustainability. This is just something that we just need to keep moving forward with. It's something at WSM we're really fixated on, and we're messaging a lot around this on our content. So, you know, in addition to interest in circular design thinking, also anticipate the consumer demand for ethical and sustainable fabrics that have a net positive impact. I think social responsibility is becoming as important with the consumer as environmental. So I think really think about people, think about how things are made and the impacts on ethics, as well as obviously the environmental impact. That's really, really important to message and to sort of really work on in the strategy. Invest in adaptable and modern function. Again, we're seeing consumers really wanting extra enhancements within their fabrics. That can be anything from like easy care, non-crease, to maybe more climate adaptive performance, but it could be about softness. It could be about moisturizing. It could be many things. And we are seeing fabrics that come with lots and lots of functionality. I think the main thing to think about this is how to make those sustainable, and how many of those technologies do you need versus like how do you kind of lessen the impact of adding things to fabrics. Can things be made and spun in the fiber rather than be applied? How do you sort of build that functionality and performance within fabric in a low impact way? And then last, source into must-have trans-seasonal classics. So we are seeing a sort of consumer frugality taking precedent a little bit at the moment, and we will push out of that, we're pretty sure. We're sort of anticipating beyond 22, 23 that we want to sort of be pushing forwards, more colour, more joy, and I think we will see that happen. But I think there's definitely some benefit to be had for looking at your core products, think about how you can improve them, optimise them, tweak them, update them. And I think very much play into this seasonless dressing, investment dressing, durable products, things that last longer, things that just will build consumer confidence in the products that they're buying. And also I think that idea of building in some nostalgia through looking at different decades, or looking at sort of really fun sort of nostalgic sort of trends within that, I think is a nice way to do updates here as well. Okay, so I hope that was insightful. I wonder if there are any questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Helen. That was great. Super insightful. I'm very excited to see where the trends take us in the new year. We do have a couple of questions, and just a note for the audience: if you have any other questions, please jot them down now, and we will try to get to as many before we hit 2 o'clock. So the first question here is around colors. What is the methodology to determine the key colors that you ran through today?
Oh, okay, that's a good one. So we do a lot of different things at WGSN. So we track color through analysis. So we always we track as we do our seasonal palettes, we actually capture a lot of our colors through the season. So although a lot of the things that we do at WGSN is kind of the maths and the magic, that's kind of how it's been coined. So you need the maths as well as the magic. So when we're doing our colors, we're constantly tracking the colors that we've already chosen, selected, and published, and we track how they're doing. And that's through that's through our own analysis, but it's also through the media and things like that. And we see where our colors go into the media or go into other areas, and we see how that's being looked at, as well as obviously our own subscribers through our own site content. We also track the catwalks. We track color at trade shows. So we really are really quite serious about how we're analyzing color. But at the same time, we also do inspirational color, because I think if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be getting excited and suddenly everyone's interested in lilac, in digital lilac. You know, it has to come from inspiration and newness, because I think sometimes when you get a bit tired of a color, often your colleagues are feeling the same. Like, I think there's a kind of an emotional feeling around color as well, when things feel fresh and new and exciting, and when maybe they're waning. So we can track how things are selling through retail. We can track how color is doing on social media, how brands are using our colors, you know, what's in the stores. It's really interesting. There's lots of facets to it, but be assured that we're analyzing color, and we're also trying to sort of create new ideas around color too.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
really
It's also the impression that we get from consumers and the mood and the current state of the world also really truly helps inspire colors in fashion. So that's great. We have an interesting question here in response to more natural looking colors and unbleached cotton. Do you think the unbleached cotton is a response to consumers looking for more natural looking colors, with or without actual sustainable components? You know, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting one for us, actually, because we thought about that at WSM when we were starting to really look at the emerging sort of trends for botanically dyed and food waste dyed color, and, you know, the whole sort of approach that we're seeing from small direct-to-consumer brands, as well as, you know, obviously some of the big, really important brands who are really going down that route and looking at sustainable color. And obviously for us as a sort of an information hub, we felt that when we were looking at our colors, we were actually, to kind of start even the conversation around this, we actually looked at what colors could be achieved with natural dye stuffs. And we even did some natural dyeing ourselves. And we felt that as an influencer, we should be conversation by how we're showing color. So I think we were referencing natural colors. We were using colors that you could achieve with natural colors, to kind of, I feel like it, you know, sometimes you're creating a trend as well as trying to drive the authentic kind of narrative, but sometimes there's a place to kind of create a trend around it too. And of course, underneath that, we're having conversations with suppliers or mills or brands who are interested in that and are doing that as well. So we're getting information about, you know, what's happening there. But I certainly feel that I think there is more of a feeling towards natural materials in general. I think that consumers have been a little bit worried about the whole plastic story. And, you know, I think they're becoming a little bit more savvy about fibers and materials, and, you know, the fact that synthetics are derived from oil and plastic and things like that. And it's interesting, you know. I think that from my point of view, we should be looking at all fibers, and everything should sort of be in balance. It's not about one fiber or another, or what, you know, some technical. I would say that tones, I think, is resin, but I think, yes, an appreciation of those softer, and they can be pastels and soft tones, but also vintage mid-tones and things like that, slightly washed down tones. But yeah, I think a natural look overall is has been quite well appreciated, definitely.
Fantastic, thank you. We had a few questions actually coming in asking what your background is, because it looks so interesting. So wanted to share that. It does look pretty great. But we do have some other questions related to comfort and athleisure. Okay. So they're asking what's next. You know, of course, you know, they want to make sure that they're not assuming that it's safe to move away from this trend, especially since you touched on some of these comfort and performance-driven trends. So are we in this new era of fabric development? What do you think is driving this trend?
Yeah, so I think that, yeah, we've talked about this quite a lot. I think that we're thinking at WSM, we don't want people to get too comfortable. Like, I think, you know, we are, yeah, people are starting to return back to work. I think we do need to think about maybe slightly more hybrid sort of ways of dressing. Could be that people will be teaming athleisure with some smarter looks, like maybe a drawstring pant with a shirt and that kind of thing. So we definitely, I think there's lots of sort of different movements around this. I guess in athleisure, we've got, the whole sustainable kind of messaging. So we're seeing, a lot of botanical dyes, sort of low impact fibers. There's definitely a kind of a trend towards, really sustainable looking products in that area. But I think there is a kind of probably a bit more of a smarter glamour feeling as well. There's still that fashion athleisure hybrid. So we're seeing silky, we're seeing, day to night sort of textures, things that can kind of move from one sort of activity to the next. So I think it's interesting. I think that there's quite a lot of design scope around the kind of smarter looks and the sort of the more comfort driven pieces. What we're seeing that's quite interesting is layering and styling with this as well. So people are still buying comfort pieces, but they're kind of, putting a jacket or a shirt with a kind of softer pants and things like that. So I think we'll start to see that styling look coming through as much as anything. In terms of fabric, I definitely think performance is really important, and making things, that are more adaptable, longer lasting. Durability is really, really important. It's not a very sexy word, but I think, things that last well, work really well with lifestyles of people on the move, just high, quite high performing everyday fabrics is quite important here, I think. So I think
very interesting on the topic of performance, and this is a pretty good segue into a question that caught my eye here. What is the most effective way to communicate the characteristics and benefits of a fabric to consumers without necessarily relying on tags? Any thoughts there?
On tags, you mean what? You mean physical or digital? Just trying to understand the question.
Physical. Yeah, I'm assuming physical.
You mean like swing tags and things like that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I guess that, if it's about the physical product, I think we are finding that consumers are looking more and more at labels and at swing tags. It's something that we haven't seen for a long time. I think that it's really interesting because we're at a point of scientific innovation in textiles, and what used to draw you into a trade show, seeing trend boards or catwalk images. Now you're seeing certifications and fiber brands and things like that. And we're in that quite interesting moment. So that kind of reassurance, certification, traceability, fiber knowledge, that is playing to consumer interests actually. And consumers are savvy. We're looking at search terms. Consumers are looking for things like that. Ethical fashion, sustainable cotton, it is happening. People are looking for it. They're interested. And on web platforms, we're seeing curated, sustainable products and things like that. People are looking at the indexes of compositions. So I think, just make sure that your messaging is clear. It's not greenwashy. It's validated. Look at certifications where you can. Just back up what you're doing. And guarantee, performance.
Exactly. And I think it's important to also look at your marketing and make sure that it's transparent, but it's also a core value in the business, not just to a point, a marketing tactic, but truly a part of the DNA for the business and the collections that you're pushing forward.
Absolutely.
There are plenty of questions around sustainability. So, there's so many, but I'm going to try to round it out with one that does come to mind a lot, even, for us at Informa, how, excuse me, there's so many questions around sustainability. Let me just pull this one really quickly. So for more of the fast fashion companies, how do you suggest that they begin to start to implement sustainability and sustainable practice? It does seem to be the future, the present, and a really important part of where we should be going. So any thoughts there? Oh, Helen, we're having some trouble hearing you. Maybe you hit mute.
Yeah, so I think from the conversations we've had with a lot of brands, and to be honest, a lot of fast fashion brands are. No. Should I?
Oh, I think you are back now. Sorry, guys, just a little bit of a technical difficulty here. Oh, we have you back, Helen. Hi.
Okay. So I think that a lot of the fast fashion big brands are actually doing this quite well. I think the thing is with big brands, they have the sort of power and the clout to kind of drive change. So I would say, you know, for fast fashion brands, just look at your biggest problem first and see where you can address that, because that's where you're going to make the most impact. If you look at the biggest volume of your fibers, or, you know, the biggest area that you want to change, you kind of need to have a strategy to kind of drive through that and then implement smaller things at the same time. But I think it's really focusing on the things that you want to change the most and make a real effort to kind of set milestones around that. But also things like, you know, over dependence on certain fibers is difficult for the environment. You know, think about, you know, how you sort of sourcing. And I think it's about considering the whole product. So not just getting it to the shop floor, it's kind of considering the whole life cycle of the product you're developing. I think circular fashion is something that we all need to get to grips with, you know, working out what to do with the waste that's being produced in the industry. So that is a massive issue that needs to be addressed. So very important.
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much. There is an overwhelming amount of questions here, and I apologize to the audience that we can't get to all of them today. We'll make sure to follow up with any other insights that we do have available. Helen, thank you so much for joining us. This was incredible.
Thank you.
To anyone else who's wondering, we will be sending the presentation via email to everyone that attended today, along with the Trend Toolkit presentation that was reviewed. So thanks again. Looking forward to the next session. Have a good day.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.